Trump escalated his rhetoric against Iran and turned the nuclear crisis into a test of strength before the world. This Thursday, April 30th, 2026, the United States Army is reinforcing its presence in the Middle East. And the blockade is tightening Tehran's economy to the point of making the Iranian currency plummet, while Iran is already preparing for a wave of new protests. Trump states that not even Vladimir Putin wants to see Iran with a nuclear weapon. The message is direct and forceful. The regime may insist on confrontation, but each day without an agreement increases isolation, undermines internal confidence, and pushes the country into an even deeper crisis. I'll tell you all about it in a moment, but now you'll want to be subscribed to the channel to stay well informed. Real-time information with the best journalistic quality you've ever seen. Milson Alves, the benchmark for credibility. Trump is not just making speeches, he has published a new message, saying that Iran can't get organized, doesn't know how to sign an agreement without a nuclear weapon, and needs to make up its mind soon. The post came along with the phrase, "Enough of being nice," amid the deadlock in negotiations to end the war involving the United States, Israel, and Iran. Behind the scenes, the White House is considering extending the blockade against Iranian ports. The assessment attributed to American authorities is that the blockade may be less risky than resuming large-scale bombings, strong enough to squeeze the Iranian economy until the regime accepts a tougher nuclear deal. The main demand remains clear. Iran needs to give up the path that could lead to a nuclear bomb. The blockade hits the regime's most sensitive point, oil. Without being able to normally export its production, Iran starts facing a lack of storage space for oil, a drop in revenue, and the risk of shutting down wells. Experts cited by Al Jazeera point out that if the blockade continues, Tehran may be forced to reduce production because storage facilities could fill up quickly. Karg Island, the main terminal for Iranian oil exports, has become a symbol of this pressure. Trump's logic is straightforward. If the Iranian regime depends on oil to finance its military machine, its armed allies, and its regional presence, cutting off that flow means weakening the foundation of Tehran's power. It's not just a diplomatic dispute, it's a campaign of economic strangulation designed to force Iran to choose between negotiating or watching its own financial structure melt away. Meanwhile, the United States military is sending more forces to the Middle East. The Washington Post reported that thousands of additional troops have been deployed to the region, including about 6,000 on board. Another 4,200 troops from the Boxer amphibious group were also expected near the area. The military presence increases America's negotiating capability. This military presence serves as a message. Trump maintains the blockade, pushes for a deal, and makes it clear that force is available if the regime tries to stall. The White House doesn't want to sell the idea of open war at any cost, but it also doesn't want to appear to be a hostage of Tehran. That's why the strategy combines ships, economic pressure, public warnings, and negotiations held under threat. The result is already showing inside Iran. The Iranian currency has fallen to a historic low, reaching 1,810,000 rials per dollar according to Reuters. The drop was nearly 15% in just 2 days, with an annual inflation rate of 65.8% in the Iranian month that ended on April 20. The pressure from the blockade, combined with damage to infrastructure and the difficulty of obtaining hard currency from other nations, has put the Iranian economy into a state of shock. The crisis is not just about the numbers. When the currency loses value, food prices go up, wages lose purchasing power, and the population feels the impact immediately. In the news reports circulating, there are accounts of concern about a new wave of protests because inflation, unemployment, and the rising cost of living are hitting the most dangerous point for any closed regime, the public's patience. The Institute for the Study of War also pointed out that Iran's main national security decision-making body may be preparing for a possible wave of protests in the face of economic deterioration and social pressure. This shows that Tehran understands the risk. The regime may try to resist the blockade in its rhetoric, but it knows that the declining economy could open up an internal rift that is hard to control. Trump is betting exactly on that rift. The message is that the Iranian regime will not be brought down by empty promises, but by real pressure on finances, oil trade, and military capability. The idea is to take away Tehran's luxury of negotiating at no cost. Each day of blockade increases the pressure. Every ship at a standstill, every barrel without a destination, and every drop in the currency's value reinforces the same message. At the same time, Washington tries to turn Putin's position into an embarrassment for Iran. If even Russia, an important partner of Tehran on several fronts, doesn't want to see Iran with nuclear weapons, the regime becomes even more isolated from the international narrative. Trump uses this to say that the issue is not just an American demand, it's a red line that even Moscow, according to him, recognizes. This point is important because Iran has always tried to present its nuclear program as a national right and a symbol of sovereignty. But Trump tries to shift the focus of the conversation. The problem isn't energy, science, or national pride. The problem is allowing a regime accused of funding armed groups and destabilizing the Middle East to have access to a nuclear weapon. In this context, Tehran doesn't appear as a victim, but as a threat. It's a tough assessment for Tehran. While Iran tries to resist, other regional forces begin to move to protect their own interests. The Emirates seek greater independence in the oil sector. Israel signals that it is ready to resume operations if it gets the green light from the Americans. The United States is increasing its military presence. And Trump tries to use Putin as further proof that Iran is running out of options. The Iranian regime is still trying to react. Authorities in Tehran speak of resistance. They accuse Washington of trying to cause internal division and demand an end to the blockade in order to return to negotiations. But the American response so far is to keep up the pressure. Trump indicated that he did not accept a proposal that would reopen the Strait of Hormuz while leaving the nuclear debate for later. For him, that would be giving relief before the main concession. That's why the phrase "no more playing nice" doesn't appear in isolation. It sums up the new phase of the American strategy. First, attacks reduced Iran's military capabilities, according to Trump. Then came the ceasefire. Now comes the phase of economic strangulation, with ships, oil, currency, and negotiations stalled. Tehran still has cards to play, but it's no longer playing as comfortably. Inside Iran, the danger is growing because the population feels the crisis before the elite does. When food prices rise, when the currency loses value, and when jobs disappear, the pressure leaves the offices and reaches the streets. This is the point where the regime fears losing control the most. Repression can contain protests for a while, but it doesn't solve inflation, lack of income, or the collapse of trust. For Trump, this is the time to turn up the pressure, not to back down. The American president wants to show that Iran will only have a way out if it accepts an agreement that blocks the path to a nuclear weapon. And the conversation with Putin supports that narrative because it denies Tehran the ability to say that the pressure comes only from Washington and Israel. If Moscow also doesn't want this bomb in Iranian hands, the isolation becomes even more severe. The case now revolves around a practical question. How long can the Iranian regime hold out without giving up something central? The currency has already plummeted, oil is stuck, maritime trade is under pressure, protests are raising internal security concerns, and American military strength is growing in the region. The blockade has become Trump's main tool to push Tehran into an agreement. In the end, the message is short. Trump has put Iran before a bitter choice. Accept a deal that rules out a nuclear weapon or continue losing money, influence, and stability. And the statement about Putin reinforces the most sensitive point of this crisis. Not even Moscow wants to see Tehran crossing that line. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with Milson Alves community.